Good morning, YouTube, and welcome to RV Daydream. I'll be your host today, Mike, and unfortunately, Miss Heidi's on location. Let's talk about generators.
Have you been up to?
I've been riding on a daydream.
So some of you may or may not have seen my previous video on the generator that we've been utilizing with our RV for about a year and a half now, and we've been very happy with it. It's a Champion. It's a dual fuel. It's not the one that you get at Camping World. This is one that's a 3400 watt, and that's just a max or peak watt on gasoline. On propane, as far as running watts or peak watts, you're only at like 3,000, and we run on propane pretty much exclusively. The Champion really was targeting the Honda 3000 as much as it possibly could. That's kind of a top rung generator, but they also have top rung prices. You're talking a 3,000 watt generator for about $2,000. $2,000 is a lot of money for a generator. However, there's other alternatives out there, and there's other really decent products out there that have been competing to vie for that spot of cheap Honda killer. Another one that has been out for a short time now is the Atima generator, and that's what I want to talk about today. Now, before we even get into this generator was sent to me to review and use. I was not paid for this. I'm not getting any kind of a kickback for this. I just was sent the generator to utilize and see what I thought and do a review of it. And I told him if I thought it was a good enough generator, I'd put a video out for it. So if you're seeing this video, must be pretty decent. So let's go ahead and look at what I've got. This is the way it arrived. It's on Amazon. Of course, I'm going to put the link down below for this so there's no confusion. You'll get the exact same generator that I'm talking about today. This is the Atima, powered by Yamaha. We'll get into that in a second. And it's an inverter generator, so it's a quiet technology. This is an AY3000. You can see that the power AC output, 3,000 watts. You've got 2,600 watts rated. And what that means is that's basically like the running wattage. It can handle 3,000 watts, but for a short time. Now, as far as amps, as far as rated amps and running amps or starting amps, this is going to be probably around 21 amps, maybe 23 amps whenever it's running. And that's pretty comparable to a lot of the other 3,000 watt generators that are out there. Now, the Champion being a 3,400 watt generator, you're talking that to be around 26 to 28 watts. But of course, this is more efficient in gasoline, I'm sure, because it does have a smaller engine. This is a 171cc Yamaha engine. It's an MZ175 engine. Basically, if we put it into American terms, which we like to do that a lot, this is about a 4-horse engine. It creates about 4 horsepower at 3,600 RPMs. And a lot of these little engines, they run right around 3,200, 3,600 RPMs. So it's a pretty traditional engine, and the best part about it is Yamaha. If you was to get a Yamaha generator that was the equivalent of this 3,000 watt, you're definitely in that $2,000 range, and this isn't priced even close to that. Matter of fact, I think it's on sale currently. So let's go ahead and open this thing up. I'm going to unbox it. We're going to set it up. You can follow this if you do have one of these generators for a setup, and I'll give you my thoughts on this. If you guys don't know, which some of you may not if you just stumbled upon this generator, I was a OPE certified 2-stroke, 4-stroke mechanic for many years. I did a lot of work for a lot of different shops. I worked for Sears for a while. I worked for a company that used to service all of Home Depot's outdoor power equipment. And I also worked at a couple of the local shops. After a while, I ran my own successful business here out of this messy garage because I haven't been working in it for years. And as far as small engines go, some of the stuff that I point out is stuff that I've learned over the years, and some of it is what I came across, some of it is what I was taught during seminars. So if I make comment on something and you have some kind of question about it, do your own research. But for the most part, I won't steer you wrong. What I tell you is what I've heard. Something may have changed over the years, but I seriously doubt it, because a lot of the stuff that I'm going to talk about is basic small engine operation and things you need to know. This is the way UPS delivered it. It is a pretty heavy duty box, and it's got a couple of handles on the side which allow you to reach through and grab the handles that are on here. on the generator themselves. All right, first thing you're going to come across is the instructions. And one thing I want to point out is, as far as this coming from China, yes, it does come from China. However, all the design and everything's done in Japan. I don't know why that seems to make a difference to people at this point, other than what happened years ago when China first started putting product onto the marketplace in the US. Some of the stuff was really bad, so that's why China's kind of had this reputation of not putting out good product. Well, the fact that the demand has become so great in the US for a lot of this stuff because of it being more inexpensive than the Japanese counterparts, the China brands have been competing with each other to make a good quality product, so people will go on to that instead of sticking with the Japanese stuff that they've always known. You get a tool kit, a charging cable that plugs into the cigarette lighter. You also have a spark plug socket, and you have a couple of booklets. What's really nice is you have the booklet on the generator itself that shows you all the operation and how to do the things that you need to do, but you also have the Yamaha owner's manual. Again, this is a Yamaha engine, remember that. Those Yamaha engines aren't cheap. The other thing we have is 4-stroke engine oil. They include the oil. Now, Champion didn't do that. So what I'm gonna do is use this for the break-in period, and then I'll go get some really decent synthetic stuff that's going to maybe have a little bit less zinc compound in it, stuff like that, that will help with the engine's longevity, where this is just a break-in oil, and of course, there's information again in the manual to explain all this to you. And at first glance, as soon as I'm opening this up, it looks, you know what it kind of reminds me of is Wall-E. Actually, it reminds me of Asimo, the Honda robot. That's what it looks like to me. It's a really nice finish. Now, I know that this cover right here, the white cover is plastic. I know that this black cover is plastic. However, this is metal, and this is a metal composite. This entire silver frame that's on both sides is a metal composite. All right, so a couple of things I want you to recognize here is there's a big LCD here. There's a lot of information that comes up on this LCD, and you cycle through that different bit of information with this one button. It's kind of nice you don't have multiple buttons that you got to deal with. Then as far as some of the transportation niceties, this has a flip-up handle, just like the Champion does. This handle feels a little bit more flimsy, and it is pretty cold today. I would expect if I really cranked on this, I could get it to snap, but why would you do that? The one thing that I keep on wanting to come back to is these metal handles, because on the Champion, they're plastic. They go across. And the problem with that, if you guys don't know, when you're out RVing, generators have a tendency to be stolen if they're relatively easy to get to. This isn't very big. It would be very hard to just throw this onto the back of a four-wheeler out in the desert and take off with it, leaving us without air conditioning in the middle of the night. However, the fact that these rods are here, that means I can run some cables through here, and now they need to either bring some bolt cutters or a hacksaw. Again, I've said this 1,000 times. If somebody wants this generator or anything of yours, they're going to get it. I don't care how much security you have on it, unless you're living and camping in Fort Knox, then that's another story. As far as the generator weight, and what I mentioned about carrying it, it's listed as 77 pounds. I'm assuming with fuel it's probably a little bit more. This is lighter than the Champion, and the reason is because this does not have an electric start, which you have the weight of the starter, and then you have a battery that's involved with an electric start model. Now, I don't have a problem with that because these things are so easy to start. I mean, when you pull the cord, it's not like the old lawnmower from 1970 that you got to really yank on it. This is a nice gentle pull that can be pretty much started by anyone, even people that don't have that quickness of hand and strength to do a normal pull. This thing can be a nice gentle pull, and it does the job. All right, let's flip it around and look at the front side. Okay, this is definitely the business end. On the front side here, you see quite a few little knobs and gadgets and stuff like that. It's something that you need to familiarize yourself with. However, quite honestly, this isn't anything that's out of the ordinary from any other generator. As far as the components, it's always the same. You do have what they call a cigar lighter. This is going to be your power port. You have your smart throttle, which could be called eco mode or eco throttle. There's going to be a couple of lights here, actually 3 of them. And it's going to tell you what the deal is as far as running the generator if it shuts off. Or when it's running. Oil, of course, if you see that, that means you're low on oil. There is an oil sensor on here. that may or may not shut off the engine whenever the oil gets too low. And the reason I say that is because we had a very reputable engine manufacturer when I worked in the shop that had a massive line of failures on generators, all because of a faulty oil pressure sensor switch. And even though the generators were out of oil, they blew up. They continued to run and blow up instead of shut off. So always check your oil, which we'll talk about that here in a second. That's what this access door is. You have an overcharge or an overload, and what that does is flash whenever you put too much to this. Basically what I'm saying is, if I plugged this in, turned on my air conditioning, and then at that point I turned on my hot water tank or turned on something else inside there that was a big drain, like a little portable heater that would run on electric, it would allow the generator to continue to run, but it would overload it. It would kick it off, it would protect it, and this light would flash. So all your power would be lost inside your RV. The generator would continue to run, but this would flash. This light's on when everything's fine. You start it, run it, it does all the stuff that it should. That's when this light is running. Grounding cable. Now, I don't know if this one has a floating ground or not. I'm gonna have to check that. But this is something that a lot of people talk about, running a wire from here to the chassis of your RV when you're connected to the RV and this is mounted on the RV. What this is definitely used for, though, is the parallel cables. So this can parallel with another unit like this. Atima also makes a 2000 watt unit. You can parallel the 2000 watt unit for sure. So basically, instead of 3000, you'd have 5000 watts. If you've got a big, maybe dual rooftop air conditioners, you may have to parallel two of these to run 6000 watts. As far as this here, really simple. When you're going to start it, you're going to put this all the way over to the choke. Whenever you pull it and it starts to run, you go ahead and move it to on, and that's it. Now, don't pay attention so much to where these positions are on the case. Feel it. There's notches in there. So off, it's definitely got a notch there. If you go up so far, although it's kind of pointed to on, there's a notch there. You know you are where you need to be. And then choke is just all the way to the right. Now, there's also a USB port. These USB ports are becoming popular on a lot of stuff, and this is one of those things that I may or may not utilize. I don't think that I would be outside necessarily charging anything with a USB, but it's nice to have. There are some other things that are USB powered that might be comparable, and you may want to run outside. I mean, you may have a USB powered outdoor lawn garden thing. You might have outdoor powered lights that recharge with a USB. That's what this is for, something like that. Now, as far as running this in the rain, I get a lot of people that ask this about our generator, our Champion. None of these are made to be run. I'm trying to put it in a way that's nice. These are generating electricity. You don't want anything that generates electricity to be in the rain. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. However, it will shed some water to some extent, but if you're going to be putting it out in the weather, in the sun, that kind of a thing, you may want to invest in some sort of a cover that keeps this ventilated and keeps this shaded and the water off of it, which they do make gen tents and stuff like that you can buy, install over this or any generator for that matter. All right, so let's talk about this little door since we have this panel. On the Champion, for me to check the oil, I have to remove 2 screws. Not a big deal. They're fast screws. They don't fall out. They are attached to the cover, so you just have to turn it out a couple times and pull the cover out. I said it on that video, and I'm going to say it on this one. It is so important that you check your generator's oil all the time. Now, on my last video when I mentioned this, I had a lot of people that didn't understand what I was saying, and I'm going to try to explain it this way, maybe to be a little bit more clear this time. Briggs & Stratton, which is a known manufacturer for pretty good quality engines for quite a few years, has always said that whenever you have an engine that is failing, if you submit it for a warranty claim, they're going to check the oil consumption over an hour's time, and if it only consumes a 1/4 ounce of an oil or less, then it's not going to be warranted. No matter how much you think it's consuming too much oil, it's not going to be a warranty. A 1/4 of an ounce of oil being consumed an hour, if you run a generator 12 hours, you can get an idea how fast that oil is going to disappear. And that's considered normal by Briggs & Stratton standards before they consider it a problem. So you may have an engine that actually burns that much oil, And you need to check all the time to make sure that's not the case. With that said, that was a worst case scenario. That Champion doesn't burn any oil at all, and I don't know how many hours I have on it now. I'm sure I'm over 60 hours on it, and I'm sure that's the case with this one. And I'm sure that's the same with my pressure washer and my lawnmower, all those things. So nonetheless, you need to check your oil to be safe. Again, remember what I said about that low oil shutoff. Sometimes that don't work. So there's just some sort of a little rubber nub that's here. If you pull that, you can see the doors on a tether, and there is the oil fill right there. Atima makes something that's really nice, and I'll put the link down below for that too. They make a magnetic dipstick that will replace this plastic dipstick. Awesome. I mean, that's really great. That's good thinking. Now, a lot of the components inside the engine are aluminum, so that's not obviously going to stick to the magnet, but the heavy metal stuff, the stuff that's iron in there, that's cast iron or just ductile iron, that will stick to that magnet. So it's a good idea to pick one up. Obviously, I'm going to get one. For many, many years, for Chinese, European, Japanese engines, us Americans have been checking the oil usually incorrectly. And I want to emphasize that again when we're talking about this one. If you look on here, there's going to be some residue. That's just packaging oil. That's just machining oil that is in the generator. It's not actually oil for the generator. However, what I want you to be aware of is the way that this dipstick is marked. When you check the oil on Chinese, Japanese engines like this, you're going to have this on level ground, not tilted the way that I currently have it. And when you put the dipstick in, you're just going to kind of seat it and kind of wiggle it. You're not going to screw it in. It's going to be unscrewed. That's how you check the level of the oil if it's in these cross hatches. You do not screw it all the way in. That's the way the Americans do it with all of our Briggs & Stratton Tecumseh engines, Kohler engines. That's the way it's been for years. However, that's the way you do it with Chinese, Japanese engines. Since I have this cover off, I'm going to go ahead and put the oil in so we can get this thing running. And you've always got to make sure not to overfill this. Whatever you do, don't overfill the engine. If you do, all is not lost. The world's not going to come to an end. At that point, you're going to have to do a whole lot of work to try to get the oil out of the cylinder. So you're most likely going to have to pull the spark plug. You're going to have to pull the cord a bunch of times, and it's very messy. Definitely get some good shop rags, some good shop paper towels to absorb all that. Again, just don't overfill. So how much oil goes in here? Well, let's check the manual and find out. I'll tell you, and we're going to fill it. All right, so I didn't want to bother showing you the oil fill because it's pretty straightforward. And one of the things is I fill them a little bit different than most should, so I'm not going to show you that. However, I want to tell you some important information, so pay attention to this. This will help you out. The generator, the engine itself, is to be used with 10W40 oil, and it needs to be a good quality oil. Now, of course, Yamaha is going to suggest, as does Atima, to use their YamaLube. All that is a good 10W40 oil that's engineered specifically for Yamaha engines. It has the right formula for these small engines that's specific. You know, the engineers design the engine, the engineers can choose the oil and how it's going to best serve that engine. I'm going to tell you this though, if you can't find YamaLube, just get a good quality 10W40 synthetic, and that should be fine. All right, now with that said, how much oil do we put in here? Yeah, that's a good question, because a lot of this stuff is in liters, and if you've seen that bottle there, there's a couple of markings on it. One was saying 13 ounce, the other was saying 19 ounce. So the higher level that's marked on that bottle is what goes in here, which in their case, they're marking it down as 19 ounces, and that's because there's a little bit of oil still in the engine from the manufacturing process. They don't want you to overfill it. However, Yamaha's measurement on this engine, the MZ175, says it should take 20 ounces of oil. It actually shows it in liters, and then it converts over to milliliters, and then you can convert it over to US ounces. But it comes out basically to be 20 US ounces of 10W40 oil. All right, that's the second thing. What's the third thing? Well, the third thing that you want to know is the change interval. Yeah, you can't just throw this oil in here and run it forever, especially when you first start it up. You need to change the oil within 1 month of running time or owning time, because even though it sits, there's contaminants attacking that oil. And also when you run, there's a lot of debris that's coming off of all these newly manufactured parts as they learn each other, as they are rubbing against each other for the first time. There's a lot of friction going on there, just like you would think in a normal relationship between two different things. So what happens is there's a lot of shedding of material, and that's going to go down into your oil. So let me just recap so I didn't confuse you there. If you get this generator, you're going to want to change the oil, running it on and off, maybe every 2 or 3 days. Let's say you run it. You want to change oil after a month. Or you can just wait until you reach the 20-hour mark. 20 hours, change the oil. Now, in my case, what I like to do is I like to run it 20 hours, change the oil, and then what I do is run it another 30 hours, maybe 20 hours, and then I change the oil again. That way you're sure to get all the contaminants out, because if you just change it like they recommend the first time, you're not going to change it again for another 6 months or 100 hours. So I think that's a pretty big interval, and I would like to just knock it out and change it again after the first 20 hours. Why is it so important that you make sure you do all this stuff? Well, for the first year, the AY3000, if you've purchased it through Atima on the Amazon website that's linked below, they're going to give you a warranty of parts and labor to fix anything on here. For the second year that you own this, you're going to get just the parts you need on the entire unit. They're not going to pay for the labor, but they're going to give you any part that you need that's legitimately failed under warranty. And then for the third year, they'll make sure that they take care of any of the parts that are necessary for the engine and the inverter. So you've got 3-year warranty. That's what it covers. I will have to point out that if you look at this plug here, this is a twist 30 amp plug. This plug will require an adapter to plug into your 30 amp travel trailer cord. You can't just plug your RV plug into this. All right, if we take a walk around the park here, if we will, you're going to see that it has some inboard rubber wheels or plastic wheels. These aren't going to absorb a lot of vibration, but these inverter technologies run so smooth, especially these Yamaha engines. That may not be a concern. If you look here, there's a spark arrestor that's on the exhaust. Now, there's a lot of people that have a lot of different thoughts about spark arresters. Spark arresters do keep fires from happening. However, a lot of people like to remove those. That is your call 100% if you feel as if you need to do that. I'm not a big fan of spark arresters myself, but I'm also very, very cautious. And the thing is, you may get into some of these national parks, especially out west, that has forest fires, and you have to have a spark arrestor on any engine that's running. Even if it's a chainsaw or you've got a little portable generator, it has to have a spark arrestor on it. So that's something to be concerned about. Before you remove it, think about it. Plus, there's a lot of work to be involved to remove it, so you may want to leave it on there. Big plus. Check this out, a fuel gauge. I don't have that on the Champion. There is a line inside that you can see where the fuel is. These are debris traps. They're really nice to have, but yeah, you can see that red line is where you are to fill the fuel at to be considered full. A tethered cap, that's always a good, nice plus. Whenever you're tightening the cap, I've said this before, let it click. The reason that you want to let that click is so you clear out the vents of any debris that might be going on there. All right, so I filled it up. You can see it's definitely right at the little red line there. This gauge is pretty accurate. It's saying full, so definitely full. So how much is full? What goes in there? How many gallons is it? Come on, let me know. 1.6 gallons. 1.6 gallons, and this is said to run 10 hours at a quarter load. Now, I hate that. I hate when all the manufacturers say this whole quarter load thing. What's a quarter load? You know, you can do the math, you can figure it out, but I want to know what it's like actually being run and under load on something. Now, as far as the Champion, I've done 3 videos on that, covering run time. And the reason that there's 3 is because the weather, the day, cut me short on the propane run time. But I ran it on gasoline, and filled it up, hooked it up to the RV, and basically just ran it. And I can't remember how many hours I got out of it, but it went a distance. Just check that video out. I'll put a link down below for that, or maybe a card up above, or both. And then on the propane, I ran it on the propane to see how long that would last. Now in this case, again, because of the conditions of the weather, I can't really do anything that will generate the same kind of load an air conditioner will on a 90-degree day. I could probably figure it out with you know, maybe a heat gun and maybe my hot water tank element, and I don't know, there's a couple other things, but it's just not going to be the kind of load that the air conditioner is going to be at. So what I'm going to do is set this down on the ground, set up the camera, and we're going to fire it up. Then I'll give you my first impressions of what the sound appears to be like, and then we'll compare it to the generator sitting right out there. Well, one thing I didn't think about, as my furnace kicks on in there again, is side-by-side comparisons. I didn't even think about doing that until I set it out here and thought, wow, this thing's taller than the Champion. It is taller than the Champion. Let's take a look here. And this is rough measurements, because this ground's not necessarily level. We're 20 inches in height, where the Champion is about 17 and a half inches in height. As far as length here, let's see, that's pretty accurate there. We're about 23 inches in length, where the Champion is, I'm going to call that a tie. It's maybe the Champion's a little bit longer. It's about 23 and a half on the Champion. Okay, so now we're looking at width. That's a big one, because I've got that mount on the front of my RV. We're at about 17 and a half inches in width, and this one I think is like 19. No, actually this one is about 18 and 3/8, so pretty comparable except for the height. This one's definitely taller, there's no doubt about that. I'm going to go ahead and give this thing a little bit of a yank, but first I need to turn the smart throttle off. Do the same for the Champion, the Hondas, any of them. When you first start it up, turn the eco mode off. The other thing you want to do is not have anything plugged into it. Don't put a load on it when it first starts. It needs to start, iron itself out, let it get to idle and warmed up, and then you can put a load on it. That's not just during break-in period or first startup. That's always, every single time. So off, turn this to choke, and we'll see how many pulls it takes for this brand new generator to start. There's one, 2 pulls. Hear the choke, and that's it. Wow, is this thing quiet? I didn't think it was going to be this quiet. We'll talk about that in a bit. You can see here, right there is showing us the volts that are coming out of it, 124, 125. That's the amps that's being drawn right now, which are 0 obviously. Watts, 0 watts are being drawn out of it. That's the RPMs, 3,500, and that's pretty close, 3,500. 60 hertz, which is normal. This is something that should stay very stable on an inverter generator, because 60 hertz is where all your electronics run. And there's your runtime meter. Now, if you guys remember with the Champion, I had to add an hour meter. This one has one already. It's showing that I'm at 0.06 hours. So it's kind of nice to know that I'm going to be able to change my oil based on the meter that's built into it. And then you go back to the volts again. This is very quiet. So the most unscientific test ever performed. I did what I could, guys. I mean, there's just only so much you can do with, you know, normal household equipment. So I have a tape measure here that is a 16-foot tape measure. You can see here, here's 15 foot, and then 16 foot is hidden underneath there. I've got the phone setting up to where the microphones aren't blocked, where there's all kinds of sound being generated towards this. So 16 feet away and you can see it's relatively open, although there is some sound reflection, I'm sure, coming off of the RV, like I mentioned before. And even the blades of grass and stuff, there's going to be some sort of sound absorption, but also some reflection too. So what do you think's going on right now by looking at this meter? Well, it says normal conversation is 60 decibel. They're both running. Not only are they both running, they're both on full mode. They're not on eco mode. This is how good these quality, lower budget generators are now. You know, that Honda's got some unbelievable sound qualities as far as keeping it quiet, but I just wanted to give you first a comparison of how loud two of them running with their eco modes off or their smart throttles off, and how quiet they are. I mean, it's not bad at all. So we'll come over here and shut this off. And now we'll just go back and measure the Champion. We're at full throttle right now. So we're at 58 decibel. I mean, you can see when I talk, it jumps up quite a bit, just me talking. So 58 decibel, it's at 16 foot away. That's not that bad. Let's go ahead and put it on eco mode. Give it a second to settle down there. 53, 54 decibel. That's pretty darn close. So, not bad. I'm telling you, these things are really, really quiet. There's this propane one. You just turn that off, and I make sure I turn off the batteries because it doesn't need to be charged any longer. All right, let's go ahead and fire this one back up again. Now that it's warm, let's see how easy it is. I'm not going to use the choke. Oh my, is that easy? So easy. Okay, so the smart throttle is off, just like we did with the Champion. Smart throttle off. Isn't that surprising? It has a different tone to it that actually sounds quieter to me. So let's go ahead and put it down on eco mode. Again, very quiet. I'll tell you what, these two are pretty much tied as far as sound. I still think that the Atima has a different tone to it that makes it sound a little bit more muffled, but that is not bad. I am very impressed with this. You know, this sounds like a broken record because I was impressed with the Champion, and I'm still impressed with the Champion. There's some features that the Champion has, such as the electric start, that's really nice. It also has the travel trailer plug already incorporated. Again, I said that that's easily changed with an adapter, or you might be able to change that plug out to where you can just plug direct into it. This one here has these metal handles. I like that as far as for theft reasons, because these handles are plastic. I can cut through those plastic handles with a hacksaw in just seconds. Now, I took that apart thinking I might be able to put metal in there, but it's all molded inside there, so that's not going to happen. The Atima has this awesome display. That's something the Champion don't have any feedback at all. You have no idea how many amps you're pulling. You don't have any idea as far as the wattage or the runtime unless you add that external meter. Again, the external meter is not a big deal to add. Nonetheless, this comes with it. They both have wheel kits. They both have handles. I think that the Champion, with the bigger wheels with the rubber outsides and the larger handle, is a little bit easier to roll around. However, this one's also lighter because it doesn't have that extra weight of the starter and the extra weight of a battery. Plus, you don't have to worry about the maintenance of the battery. Now, again, you don't have to put a battery in this one. You can take it out and you can pull start it every time, but that's a nice feature of having this one. Now, as far as this one being a little bit taller, I don't really have anything that comes to mind that makes me think that might be an issue. The only thing that might be an issue on is possibly inside of a bed of a truck. So let me go look at that real quick. So on this old truck, don't get me wrong, the new trucks have taller beds now, but on this old truck, that generator would sit just a little bit above the bed rails. Now, why would that be a concern? Well, if you don't have a cap on your truck like mine, and you have a tonneau cover, you got to make sure that that tonneau cover is something that mounts on top of the bed rails for it to clear that generator. So if I had that generator in here, the Atima generator, you'd have to make sure that you didn't have one of those low flush mount tonneau covers on the older style Fords like this one. Other than that, all the tonneau covers and the hard shells and that, they stand a little bit taller. They're taller than what this is. Again, this is an older truck and everything's gotten bigger. I mean, the new truck's set so much higher, and I mean, there's just a lot of differences to them now. But yeah, that's something that you may want to be concerned with. But the thing is I don't even keep my generator in the back of the truck anyways. I keep it up on this mount here. So, wow, there's something. Let's go ahead and try it. Let's go ahead and take that generator, the Atima, and put it up here and see what it's like. Huge difference? Not really. There is some differences though. I did measure the thickness. You can tell that it kind of bubbles out, and that would make a difference if I was, for example, to build a box around this coming straight up off of the angle iron that's currently there. The Champion sits inside those two frame rails that way. Now this is definitely shorter this way. I can't do this with the Champion. I mean, I can't pull the Champion that far and then have that much room on the other side. So as far as length, that Champion has a tendency to pull up and use up a little bit more room. But everything else is pretty comparable, again, except for the height. And I don't have a problem with the height on this mount, but looks kind of good up there, don't it? All right, so I went ahead and fired up the generator. The eco mode is off, it's turned off. And I've got the RV plugged in, but since I don't have the adapter, I've just got it plugged into the 120 receptacle, the 20 amp receptacle. Now, even though that's a 20 amp receptacle, I mean, it will take quite a bit as far as the load inside the RV. Of course, I'm not going to run my rooftop air, and I most likely won't run the hot water tank element, but I will turn on a bunch of other stuff in there. So let's get an idea here. 125 volts, 0 amps, 0 watts, 3,560 hertz, 0.33 hours. So of course we're not at an hour, and I'm going to go ahead and get inside here and see what we can turn on. The polarity check, it's just like the Champion is. It must have a floating ground. It says it's correct polarity, but it's real dim. It's very, very dim. Usually that's a little bit brighter. And you can see I have 121 volts going on in here. So let's see what we can turn on. First of all, let's turn the fan on high. So the air conditioning fan is on high. Now the furnace is on. I've got it set at 75 degrees. I'm going to turn on this little fan also. Put that on high. We're looking for stuff that runs on the electricity, not off of the battery power, not battery electricity, but electricity. We can run on the refrigerator now, so let's go ahead and turn that on. And that's a pretty big drain what I just put on there. I mean, there is a compressor in there. And then these lights here, they do run on electricity, you know, regular 110. However, they're only LEDs, so I don't expect that to draw much, but we will turn them on. We're down to 118 volts. We have some lights on. Let's go see what this thing says we're at. Still 123 volts there. We're drawing 7 amps, 868 watts. I like seeing the amperage, so we're going to leave it right there. I'm going to leave this on high, and of course the runtime was 0.06 when I first started this up with a full tank of gas with this test. So now we're going to leave that run and see how far we can go. We got some rain going on potentially here, so hopefully we don't get rained out on this test. That's why I've got this in the way, to run the water off of it and away from it. hours. I'm calling it. Oh, I didn't have to call it. It called itself. So there you go, guys. 7.5 hours. So what do I think about the generator? Well, I think that it is quieter than the Champion at full throttle, but they're the same on the econo mode. I think that I like the way this one looks a lot more than the Champion, but I don't like that it doesn't have an RV plug. I love the fact that this has a Yamaha engine. That is a huge step towards having something that's going to last a long time. I like that it has a handle. I like that it has wheels. I wish the wheels were a little bit more outboard, but I can roll it around just fine. I love that this one has a gas gauge, and I love the display that's on this that tells me watts, amps, the hours, the volts, and the hertz that this thing is running at. All those things are incredible. That's unbelievable at this price point. So would I recommend this for anybody that's on the fence? Absolutely. Would I recommend this to anyone that is comparing it to a Yamaha or a Honda 3000? Absolutely. Because the Yamaha and the Honda are pretty much just like this. They have the same type of features as this one has, except if you order something with a remote start. That's the only difference there. I think the fact that this is half the price of those new Hondas and the new Yamahas that are also 3,000 watt, you can't go wrong. I mean, in the case of the Yamaha, you're getting the same engine. So how could you go wrong there? Again, I'm going to put the link down below. And as always, I hope to see you out there. Bye.